is well with my soul. It is well. Oh, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. Oh, it is well with my soul. It is well with my
Lord. Well, we're blessed, aren't we? Amen. What a joy it is. I think we can certainly offer up thanksgiving for the great service we had here last night and yesterday morning. Wasn't the Lord present? Amen. Thank the Lord for it. Yes. Well, let's ask God to bless this class tonight. Come on, would you join with me in prayer? Lord, we're thankful for your goodness, your faithfulness to us, your goodness. Thank you for giving us this very evening together. Thank you that we live in this great country. We ask your blessings on this class tonight in Jesus' name. Amen. Just remain standing here a minute to introduce our speaker.
Well, it's my honor tonight to get to introduce a very good friend of mine that I've known many, many years. Gosh, I guess it's got to be at least 40, 45 years. And he has served many, many people in here the best steak that you could ever hope to get at the Riverfront Hilton Steakhouse. So, he has a last name, but he never tells it. He said, I'm just Shapur. And that is who I want to bring up tonight. We have been trying to get him to come, and he's been to our church before. But it's my pleasure and my honor to get him to come tonight and introduce our guest. Shapur, please come.
Thank you. It's such an honor to be here. I know most of these people here. All my friends, family, I know everybody. Everybody. Thank you. Brother Ron, thank you. It's really a pleasure to be in your church. What an awesome place. It's so peaceful, so relaxing. It's just unreal. I appreciate the invite us. I'm here to introduce Mr. Fletcher, Arkansas Hall of Fame. Our famous Frank Fletcher. I worked for this gentleman 44 years. I started September 81. So I was how old? I was what, 12 years old, Frank? I think. It's been a really honor to work for the good man like him. He's such an unbelievable. He's generous. He's kind. When we had that COVID, that hotel never shut down. He had people work in different areas. He always trying to help people, always trying to help his staff. We really appreciate you, Frank. I want you to come here, Frank, and talk about your life story, please.
Thank you, please. Thank you, be seated. I'll give you 2 or 3 excuses for me tonight. I got a little cold, I'm sniffling, and I've got a knee that needs to be replaced. So if I get real tired, I'm going to sit down. So I'll tell you that up front. It's an honor to be here. I don't know why I got invited, but I am very honored to be here. I want to start off with saying I'm a strong believer. I have a deep faith in God. And I'm going to talk to you about my journey through life. And I used to say I'm lucky. But I don't say I'm lucky anymore. I say I'm blessed. Because God is everything that I do, everywhere I turn, I get a sense in my spirit of what I should do. I didn't have that when I was young, but I have it now. And it's a tremendous help to not know whether to go left or right, but to go where your spirit takes you to. So I'm going to break this down, and I've got notes here, so if I get lost, I'm going to be able to turn to them. I'm going to try to tell you what I'm going to speak about tonight. I'm going to start off by talking about my young life, and then I'm going to talk about my first jobs. And then I'm going to talk about Sam Walton and Walmart. And then I'm going to talk about the automobile business, which most of you know me from being in the automobile business. And last, I'm going to talk about the hotel and the restaurants. First, I want to tell you all that Shapur is a very dear friend of mine. He travels with me. We have a lot of fun to go together. He works very hard, and he's not afraid to tell me when things are not right. He called me Sunday, and he said, we served some lobster this weekend. It wasn't right up where you want it to be. So when somebody will tell you when things are not right, they're your friend. Don't everybody tell you, yes, that's great, because you can't fix anything if you don't know what's wrong. So let me start off by telling you the first subject is my early life. I was adopted from St. Vincent's Hospital by two fine people, Frank and Eileen Fletcher, who didn't have any kids. And they just came to the hospital, and I think at that point in time, you looked in the window and you picked out somebody, and they said, well, these look like good people. You can take him home. So we went down to where I lived my young life was in Tamo, Arkansas. That's going down south of Pine Bluff like you're going to Florida. You go down, you see Moscow, Tamo, Grady, Dumas, Goo. That's the way you go. So next time you go by there, you'll see a water tower. And the population there when my grandmother was in town was 4. So we had a cotton gin, and I had a wonderful life riding horses and grew up. And as soon as I was 5 or 6 years old, they told me I was adopted, and they said I was bad when I was little. They couldn't take me in anywhere. They left me in the car. So I hope I got better. But I never had a thought about trying to find out who my real parents were. I had great parents, and they gave me a great life. So I lived there on the farm in a cotton gin, drove tractors every day, and I didn't want that life. It was very hard. So my mother and daddy weren't educated. So they, well, first I want to tell you, I went to school in Grady, which is a very small school. It's now closed. But I'm 6'4" now. I was 6'4" when I was in the 7th grade. I just didn't have this. I just had this. So I was an all-state basketball player, 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. Man, the play was I would lumber down underneath the basket, and they would get the ball to me, and I'd bounce it against the backboard until it went in. And so the Pine Bluff coach came down and told my father, said, he's going to be 6'8" or 6'9". We need to get him up here at Pine Bluff. So I thought about that, and I said, this is the way for me to get a car. So at 14 years old, I got a restricted driver's license, and I went to Pine Bluff. So I started there in the 10th grade, and I was going to be a star. Well, the first practice, they broke 3 teeth out and broke 4 ribs, and I sat on the bench at Pine Bluff for 3 years, and I never was a star. But I kept practicing, but I weighed 140 pounds, and I was too small, too thin. I wasn't plenty tall. But I wasn't made for basketball, but I enjoyed it. But during that, and the reason I tell you that story was, a young girl came up to me and she said, are you that boy from Grady? And I said, I guess so. And she said, well, I'm Judy Ham. I'm the captain of the cheerleaders, and I'd like to drive that convertible you got down Main Street with all the cheerleaders. I said, well, honey, this is a stick shift. You know how to drive that? And she said, yeah, I know how to drive it. So she drove down Main Street, and her mother worked at the bank. Her mother came outside, and I don't know what bad words she said, but she told her, stay away from anybody who has a car like that. Had loud mufflers on it, and so her mother was not very approving. But so we fell in love, and as I say, she took me out of the market. She doesn't like me to say that. But so we graduated school and dated all 10th, 11th, 12th grade. She went to Henderson, and I went to the university. And my parents said, if you make a C, you're going to come home and drive this tractor the rest of your life. You're going to be done. So I wasn't very smart, and you'll find out I'm not very smart now. But I found out those football players weren't very smart either. So I went over and talked to them and said, what kind of classes are y'all taking? So they took social dance. So I took social dance, and I made an A in social dance. So I didn't learn much, but I learned how to dance as a freshman in college. So she went to Henderson, and I'm up to university. So I graduated in 4 years out of fear, just fear that I'd be back on that tractor. So we'd always said we'd get married, and I got word about 3 months before we were graduating that my love, Judy, had an engagement ring from another boy on her hand. So I rushed home to Pine Bluff, took her to the drive-in movies, and I said, listen, I don't know what's happened, but this is a real problem. You know, I'll never get married to anybody else. You know, I'm going to kiss you here at the drive-in. And she said, you're not going to kiss me. I've got this other boy's ring on. So she wouldn't even let me hold her hand. So she said, I'll have to think about your proposal. So anyway, about 3 or 4 days later, she gave him his ring back. And then she said, where's my ring? So that's what I call a shotgun wedding. So we got married shortly after because I didn't have any choice then. But I was glad we got married. And something significant happened at the wedding. When we came out of the church, my father and mother met us at the end of the church and said, you sure got a lovely wife. You got a great education. Let me see your billfold. So we're getting ready to go on a honeymoon. I think he's going to give me at least $500. He took my billfold and shook it, and all the credit cards hit the floor. And he said, here's $100. You got an education, a beautiful wife. Don't call us unless you're sick. And he sold my car. So I started life off at 21 with $100. And I tell you that story because I had a car, had a nice life growing up, but boy, that $100 and a new wife was pretty tough. In the meantime, I had to join the Army because Vietnam was going on. So I left my wife with my father and mother, and I went off to Fort Polk, Louisiana. So if any of you have ever been down there, that's a bad place. So that was what the Army taught me was discipline. I'd never had any discipline in my life, and I was as soft as a marshmallow. When you get through running up and down a hill with a backpack and an M16, you learn something you don't learn in college. So I was in the reserve, so I spent six months on active duty and 6 years in the reserve. So when I get out, the second phase of my life I want to talk about is my job. So my 4 years of education was graduated in business administration, which meant I know nothing. So you'd go to interview and they'd go, what do you know? And I'd go, nothing. So I got a job at Worland Bank, and my title was go for. Go get this, go for that. That was it. I worked in the trust department. $680, I'll never forget, a month, not a week. So we didn't have a television. As I said, we had $100, and we borrowed $1,200 to buy a Volkswagen Bug, if you know what a Bug is. So I worked at Worland Bank during the day, and my wife, she worked too, and she picked me up at 5 and took me to Shakey's Pizza Parlor on Relson Park Road. Any of you that are older will remember the first Shakey's that was here in town. So I worked there for $1.60 an hour. That was minimum wage, $1.60. So we needed $400 to buy a television. So I love this story because it was the foundation of everything for me from then on. So I worked there for about a year, and it wasn't any trouble at that age, to work till midnight and get up and go to the bank the next morning. It wasn't a problem. So I really wanted to get a better job, so I went down to the unemployment or the employment bureau and said, I'd like to get a job. And the lady said, what can you do? And I said, I can't think of anything. She said, you look like you're a pretty good talker. She said, you need to be a salesman. So I said, well, I don't want to knock on anybody's door, sell them anything. She said, well, we'll get you a job. So she got me a job with DuPont. And for you that are older, DuPont made Lucite paint. No drip, no splatter, Lucite. And it was a great brand. And so one of my first calls was in Harrison, Arkansas. When I started my new job, I quit the bank, quit Shakey's, got a cheap car, and $600 or $700 from DuPont, but I could travel. So I went up to Harrison, and I had a great account there called Bond Steel Lumber Company. And my bosses had told me to go in and be really nice to them. They were a big paint dealer. So I went down the road, and there's another fellow I met that started Walmart number two, Harrison, Arkansas. A guy named Sam Walton. So I'm 23 or 24. I forget what age I was then. And so I go in and talk to him, and he said, I don't have much time. What do you got, bud? And I said, well, I'd like to talk to you about some Lucite paint. He said, you represent DuPont? I gave him my card, which I was real proud of. He said, well, let's step over here in this aisle. I want to talk to you. He said, I'd like to buy that. We don't have any brand names. Y'all think back now. Walmart's probably got 3,000 stores. This is store number 2. That's how long ago it was. And so he really wanted to buy that paint. And he said, so how much do I have to buy? And I said, 300 gallons. He said, I don't need 300 gallons. I just want to buy 50 gallons. And I said, well, I'm going to lose my account down the street as soon as you buy it. He said, well, I don't care about your account. He said, how much is 300 gallons? And I said, $1,500. And I thought his head was going to break. He was just like this, you know. I'm not going to, I just lost his voice. And he said, well, come on, go with me, because we got a problem here. I want to buy this paint, but I don't have the money, $1,500. So let's go to the Lions Club. So we sat down at this big, long table, and some man was speaking down at the end of the table. And get the picture now. I'm sitting across the table from the next richest man in the world. I'm just a kid. And so we were passing a yellow pad back and forth. He was on the other side of the table. And he said, I don't have $1,500. So I got up and excused myself and went to a payphone, called DuPont, and I said, I got a problem here. This man doesn't have $1,500. They said, well, give him 4 months dating. So I really didn't know how to explain that. So I go back and write him a note. You don't have to pay for this for 4 months. And he said, what difference does that make? And I said, you don't have to pay for it. You'll have the money. And we were passing this notepad back and forth. And he said, well, who's going to put it up on the counter? And I said, that'll be me. So anyway, that was the way I met him. And for next 25 or 30 stores, I held truckload sales out front, and I stacked the counters, and I really worked hard. And the paint sold like crazy. Oh, I didn't tell you the first thing. He said, what are we going to sell this for? And he said, how much the wall paint cost? And I said, $350. And I said, you need to sell it for $397. Again, he started doing this. He said, that's no money. I can't sell it for that. And I said, well, sir, in deep respect, don't you sell your toothpaste for less than it costs? He said, what's that got to do with paint? I said, it's the same thing. You're selling toothpaste to bring people into that department. You don't have anything in your hardware department to make people want to come to Walmart, but this paint is famous. So he fell for that story, and the paint really sold. So, I mean, it's hard for any of you to imagine that Walmart for a long time didn't have any brand names, because the most important man in every town was the pharmacist in the drugstore. And so they would tell their customers, you don't want to buy from Walmart, their stuff is not the same as we have. And so Walmart fought a battle for the first 10 years of getting people to believe it was the real stuff at a discount price. People didn't accept that, and it's hard for y'all to think through that. So I kept working for about 20, 30 stores, and Mr. Walton called me in his office, and I thought, well, maybe he's going to give me a trophy or something. So he said, I want you to quit DuPont, and I want you to go to Chicago and start looking for merchandise, more merchandise, and you work as a rep. I said, what does that mean? He goes, you'd work for commission for a lot of different companies. So I said, okay. I said, now, you understand I'm from the country. I've only been to Fayetteville. That's where I went to school. I said, how do you get to Chicago? He said, you go to Memphis and get on the train that stops in St. Louis, and a lot of people get on and off, and you'll wind up in Chicago. He forgot to tell me to wear a coat. I arrived at 8 o'clock in Chicago on a January morning, and back then you had contacts that were glass, they weren't plastic. And so as they were freezing to my eyeballs, I pulled those off my eyes and threw them down. And I was freezing with no coat at 25 below zero. It was dangerous. So I went to a place called Navy Pier. If any of you go to Chicago, Navy Pier is a kind of a tourist deal now. And so I went around to each booth and said, I'm Frank Fletcher, can I sell your stuff? And they go, who are you going to sell it to? And I said, Gibson's, Walmart, TG&Y's, naming these names. And Walmart meant nothing to those people. So skipping forward now, so I got about 25 or 30 different lines of merchandise. I had plumbing, I had TV antennas, I had anything you wanted, I had it in my briefcase. So I went around to each store, and I learned that it doesn't matter what you're selling, you got to sell yourself. So before I ever called on the manager, I'd go in the back room and get a case cutter and get all the merchandise out of anybody's product and put it on the counter, and the manager would think you're crazy. Why are you doing all that? And I go, because I got something I want to show you. So after you work for them, I learned that they will listen. So I was very successful selling. And so this went on like 70 years, and we, in the meantime, had 2 children, and I thought I was on top of the world, and I bought a Pontiac car. And quick story about cars. Mr. Walton was fanatical about if you had a big car like a Buick or a Pontiac, or Lord knows if you had a Cadillac, you were done. You would never sell them anything. So we would rent a cheap car in Fayetteville and leave our car and drive up there in a Ford Fiesta because he would throw you out if he caught you in a big car. So my second trip to Mr. Walton's office, when I thought I was riding high, Mr. Walton said, I got some bad news for you today. We're going to call all the companies you represent and have you fired, and we're going to take your 5% commission. I said, wait a minute. I've been with you since way back. And he goes, you got paid every day. Don't feel sorry for yourself. I said, I got 2 kids. I think I mentioned the word suicide, and he said, not in my office, please. So I was sick. I mean, I almost wanted to throw up. But here I was, 28 or 29, and I was without a job because I knew he was going to get me fired from all his company. So he said, go home and rent a garage and make something. And I said, Mr. Sam, I barely can turn the key on in the car. I don't know how to put 2 screws together. I have no ability to make anything. So he said, hey, you're a really good lamp salesman. We bought a whole lot of lamps from you. He said, go down there and rent a garage and just put something together. And if you're the cheapest in the world, I'll buy from you. He always threw that in. You have to be the cheapest in the world. So I did. I rented a garage and rented a forklift. Myself and a young man named Gilbert Cornwell, we opened up Cheyenne Industries. And so nobody knew our name. So we opened up a garage and we bought parts and assembled them. So I became a lamp king. And then we moved into a factory out by the airport. And so I was successful in selling Mr. Walton a lot of lamps and then mirrors and pictures. And so Mr. Walton said, Frank, you're too high. I'm not going to be able to buy from you anymore. So I said, what do I do? He said, you go to Taipei, Taiwan. I go, I barely knew where Chicago was. I don't even know where Taipei, Taiwan is. So the next thing I know, I was going overseas to Taipei, Taiwan, and opened a factory over there. And I started selling him all kind of products from there. And 10 years later, he said, you're too high. I said, we moved to China. Where else you want me to go? He said, find someplace cheaper than they are. So I went north of Hong Kong into mainland China, and I got a partner that was educated in the United States, but he was a Taiwanese young man that really helped me. And we went into China and opened up a factory. So Norman told me not to be embarrassed to talk about numbers, but we became the largest lamp company in the world. And we sold Walmart many, many years ago $150 million in lamps, just lamps. And then, but thank you for the applause. But one thing I didn't tell you, we only made a very small percentage, less than 5%. So I bought a mirror line at 100 yards long, same distance as a football field. And we made mirrors out here behind the jail on Bond Street, right off of Roosevelt. So, tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this coat off. Thank you. Sorry, but I'm sweating. So, a couple of Sam Walton stories. I was with him for 20 or 30 years, and I was one of 6 people that wasn't involved with Walmart or a Walmart person that got to go to his funeral. And I'll never forget his funeral. I'm going to tell you some funny stories on him. But when he had his funeral, they hired a New Orleans band, and they had the funeral service in the Walmart office, and they played When the Saints Come Marching In, and the band came in, and the first speaker got up and said, "This is the Yellow Pages. Mr. Walton wrote his own service, and there won't be any tears today. Everything's going to be funny, and we're going to laugh about his life." So I thought that was a great way to be remembered. But one of the things that was, Walmart had a contest called, I'm going to just use VIP. It was actually VPI, and I don't know what that stands for. Let's say VIP. They had a contest where Mr. Walton picked an item every year, and all of his vice presidents did, and the contest lasted 1 year. And if you were lucky enough to get that one item, you were going to sell millions of dollars of product. So one morning I'm asleep about 6:30 or 7, and my phone rings, and I don't know why I heard it, and I thought it was one of the guys messing with me, and I went, "Who is this?" Just like that. And he goes, "It's Sam Walton. What's wrong with you?" I go, "I'm sorry, Mr. Walton. I had a nightmare." He said, "Sit up, talk to me." I said, "Where are you?" He said, "What difference does that make? I'm in Dothan, Alabama." I thought to myself, they can't be open in Dothan, Alabama. And he said, "The security guard let me in if you want to know how I got in my own store." So he said, "You're a lucky man today." He said, "I picked your item for my VIP item, and I'm going to write you an order for $30, $40 million. Man, I was sitting on the side of the bed. I was excited. And he told me the stock number, it's number so-and-so. And it got real quiet. He got real quiet. He said, "What's wrong?" I said, "I don't know how to say this." He said, "Well, speak up." I said, "Well, it's the wrong item." He goes, "I'm sorry, you're telling me that I picked the wrong item?" And I said, "Well, yes, sir. If it doesn't sell, I'll never get another item." And he goes, "Well, what's wrong with it?" I said, "You picked it out. It's a lamp. You picked it out in Sam's Wholesale. Sam's Wholesale only marks up product 10%. You're going to sell this in Walmart, and they mark it up 35%. So once you go over that magic price point, it's not going to sell." He kind of took offense to that. He goes, He goes, "So you're turning down my item?" And I go, "Well, no, sir. If it doesn't sell, you're going to really be mad." He goes, "Okay, well, what do you suggest?" And I go, "I've got a great idea." And he said, "Well, what is it?" And I said, "Well, sir, I need to show it to you, but it's called a touch lamp. You touch it and the light comes on. You touch it again, it gets brighter." It doesn't sound very good to me, he says. He goes, "Okay, we're going to have a meeting next week where the Marriott Hotel is, down in the basement. I'm going to bring all my buyers, and you bring this touch lamp over there." So I go over there and set up these touch lamps all down this table. And Mr. Walton had all his big wigs sitting on the table, and I had my guys down at this end, and we had a box there with a color label on it. And so Mr. Sam sat down. Everybody else stood. I sat down by him, across from him. And, here I am now sitting across from the richest man in the world. Pretty intimidating. And so I turned off the lights, and I just walked down that thing and just touched each one of them. And it lit up, and I walked back past them and hit them again, and they lit up again. He said, He said, "That's nice." I said, "I thought you'd like it." He said, "Well, that looks good. Turn on the lights." So I knew we were getting ready to negotiate. He goes, "What are we going to sell these for?" And I said, $39. He goes, "Well, have you thought about what you're going to sell them to me for?" And I said, "I thought about it all weekend with deep humility. I thought about it." I said, $29 is the cheapest I can go. And he did a little multiplication with a pencil. He goes, "No, that's not the right number." And he goes, "The number is $26. And he said, "Can you do that?" And I started shaking my head. "No, I can't do that." And he said, "Well, what's your problem?" And I just sat there kind of stunned. What was I going to say? Turn down this order. And I said, "I don't know." And he said, "Well, first thing, I don't think you have the money." He said, "This man over here, do you know him?" He said, "This is Bill Bowen, First National Bank." He said, "Bill, you going to loan him the money to do this?" And he shook his head, yes. He goes, "Okay, I got one problem. What's the next problem?" And I said, "Well, sir," I said, "I don't want to make you mad." I said, "But every year you cancel all the orders in November because of January inventory." He said, "We don't do that, do we?" I said, "Every year you do it. You cancel all the orders." And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, that means that I might have $6 million left." I said, "How much are you going to buy?" He said, $25 million. I said, "Well, what if I've got $6 million left?" He goes, "Oh, we would never do that to you." And I said, "Well, that's a problem." And he said, "Well, listen, I'm going to stand up in front of all these people and shake your hand. We're going to take every one of these lamps by December 31st. He turned around and looked at a couple of his guys. "Thank you." That looks good. So he looked at his guys and gave him a nod, and I knew that the deal was done. So that's my first story, and I only tell one more about him. Many years later, we had a meeting in an office like this at Walmart, and he had all these vendors from Black & Decker, Procter & Gamble, really big companies. I mean, and our little company was very small compared to those companies. So I had no idea that he would call me on stage, but he said, gentlemen, he said, ladies and gentlemen, he said, I'm going to show you how to partner. Well, that's a dangerous word when you hear it from Mr. Walton. That means you're going to lose your belt and your pants. He said, we're going to show you how to partner. So he said, this man's been here since store number 2. Come on up here, man. I just wanted to sing. He called me up on stage. I didn't want to be up there because there were a lot of people that knew a lot more about business except me. He said, Frank, he goes, tell this group out here what is the number one lamp you sell to Walmart. He never asked you a question he didn't know the answer. I said, well, it's number T455. It's an oak and glass lamp. He said, I think that's right. He said, how much we sell it for? And I said, $79. He goes, well, that's way too high. I go, well, sir, we sell a lot of them. He goes, well, that doesn't matter. He goes, what about $49? I go, that's what I sell it to you for. He goes, no, you don't understand. I'm talking about $49 retail. I started sweating like I am now. So he said, I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you this microphone, and I'm going to give you 2 minutes. I don't want you to make a hasty decision because this may be really hard for you. And I said, will you mind if I go to the bathroom? Thank you. So, I mean, that really scared me. And I thought to myself, if I don't accept this unbelievable order, everybody's going to think I'm the dumbest guy in the country. So I took it. And so that was before I moved into mainland China. That kind of was the push from Taipei to mainland. And so anyway, I sold Cheyenne Silverwood in 2010 with the understanding of the people that bought it that they would keep everybody that worked for me, because I had a lot of people that started with me at 17, 18 years old and worked for me for 20 years. So the company was mature, and we were selling Lowe's, Home Depot. We sold everybody, and everybody sold it under their own brand name, so they didn't know our name. So our name never was a big name because they used their own brand. So I then decided I'd get in the automobile business, and a guy knocked on my door. His name was J.D. Wilson, and he was a car salesman from Moore Ford, if y'all remember Moore Ford. He said, hey, do you remember I sold you a truck? And I said, yes, sir, J.D. He said, I think I want to go to work for you driving a forklift. I said, well, I don't have that factory anymore. Why do you want to drive a forklift? He said, well, I've been in the car business 30 years, and they want me to work till 9 o'clock at night, and I don't want to do that. I said, well, what do you know how to do? And he goes, I know how to move that iron. I thought, man, I don't really know what that means, move that iron. That means sell cars. That's lingo for move that iron. So I said, well, let's get started. So we bought a mobile home. If you know where Russell Chevrolet is and where Russell Honda is, I own that building next to Russell Honda. And that was Car Plaza USA, and that was my first venture into the car business, I think in 1989. And so that was a used car store, and we lost money every month. So then I went down to Lone Oak and had a big idea that I'd buy real estate out on the front and put a white fence around it, and it had a pond there. And I had a vision that people would come go fishing, and then they'd buy a car. That ain't the way people buy cars. So I built the Chevrolet store was downtown Lone Oak, been built in 1940. So I bought that business for $100,000, which was a lot of money to me. And so I built a new store out on the interstate, and everybody in the farmland wants to buy a truck. And the only thing Chevrolet sent me were cars. So GMAC is the financial part of General Motors. So they phoned me about 6 months later, are you Frank Fletcher? I said, I think so. They go, man, you're losing about $20,000 a month. Are you okay? I said, yes, sir. I said, I owe you anything? He said, no, sir, you're paying really good, but we're concerned. And he said, would you mind coming over here to the office and let us look at you? So I go over to the office, and they go, well, just tell this group of men here why you're losing $20,000 a month. I said, I'm going to school. He goes, what do you mean? I said, I'm going to buy a lot of car dealerships, and this is an easy $20,000 a month because I don't know how to buy them. I don't know how to sell them. I don't know how to pay anybody. I don't know how to advertise. And so they kind of looked at me like I was crazy. And but it really was a school because General Motors don't teach you anything. I said, how much do I sell these for? And they pointed to the sticker and said, that's what you sell them for. Well, that's crazy. So anyway, I called a gentleman down the road and I said, are you losing money like me? And he said, yeah. And I said, let's one of us buy the other one out. And he said, let me buy you out. You're on the interstate. So I sold it for $100,000 and got out of the business. And so I went down here to Jacksonville and there was a Dodge store. So I went in to see the man and he said, I can tell you're here to try to buy my store and I want you to get out of my building. So I did. I left. I drove down the road and I said, man, you did a terrible job talking to that man. I said to myself. So I turned around and went back, and I walked in, and the man said, I told you to get out of my store. His name was Mr. Ray. And so I said, well, I'd like to talk to you about lunch. And he looked at my stomach, and he goes, buddy, you need to go on a diet. And he said, I don't eat lunch. You notice how slim I am? I go, well, what about talking to you? And he said, leave. This store is not for sale. So I went home about 2 or 3 days. I thought about it during the night. And so I went over to Merrill Lynch. And I said, give me 2 checks made after this man's name for $1 million each check. I put one in one side of my coat and the other in the other side of the coat. So I went back out there, and I had a letter that I'd written to Mr. Ray. It was 1 page, and it started off saying, you have 2 minutes to take this $1 million check, or I'm leaving. So when I came in, he was mad just by seeing me. I said, well, read this, and he saw this cashier's check. I had the other one in my pocket. And he saw this check, and he said, let's step back here to my office. And I go, we only got 1.5 minutes left. He said, you're joking. I said, we don't have very much time left. So he went back here, and he goes, what is this for? And I said, this is blue sky money. This is hunting and fishing money. I'm going to pay you for that desk. How many used cars do you have? And he said, 6. I said, I'm going to pay you for those. And he said, I said, this is your fishing money. He said, I like you, Mr. Fletcher. And he said, can I think about this? And I said, yeah, for about another minute. And so anyway, he sold me the Dodge store. He never did know about that other check I had in my pocket. But I would have given it to him if he'd asked. So that was my second store. And then, as you know, for years, if you lived here, they didn't have a Dodge store here. So I moved over here in Sherwood and built a store and then bought some more land and expanded. So since then, we have bought and sold 57 dealerships. And the reason I know it's 57 is because we number each one of them. And they say, well, what did you do that for? Well, we made a lot of mistakes. And that's one thing I hope I can teach y'all tonight, is not everything is straight up. And we opened a store in Memphis, Tennessee, paid a lot of money for it. My son really wanted it. He's involved with me. He's, Dad, this is a great big market. And we were in a good part of Memphis. And they called me about 3 months later, and they go, where do you think the bankrupt capital of the world is? And I said, I know where it is. It's Detroit. And the guy said, no, sir, it's Memphis. So nobody in Memphis had any money. And so we sold that store in 6 months, got out of it for what we put in it. And then I got the bright idea of buying a store in Huntsville, Alabama. So I went down there, and the girl at the front desk, I introduced myself. She said, you're not from here, are you? And I said, no, ma'am. She said, do you know about the road? I said, what road? She said, they're going to tear up this whole road in front of the store, and you won't be able to get here except way back through the back way. And that's why the guy sold me the store. So I sold that store about 5 minutes later. So I had a store in Springdale that it took me 2 years to get the city to let me have the property out by the interstate, and then they wanted me to build a 3-lane road into my store. I said, we only need 2 lanes, one coming and one going. Nope, you need to build 3 lanes. So anyway, Dwight Everett, who y'all know Everett is out here in Benton, he's a very nice man. He called me and he goes, Frank, Dwight Everett, he goes, I want to buy that Chevrolet store. And I said, well, thank you, Mr. Everett. I know who you are. I know you can do it. I said, but it's not for sale. I said, we just built this brand new store, built a 3-lane road. And he said, Frank, you're just wasting time. He goes, what do you want for it? I said, I don't want to sell it. He goes, well, I'm buying it, so just name a number. So I had to think about that a while. So he bought it. And I I had a Honda store in Columbia, Missouri. And what I learned by being in Columbia, it's a great town, and I love Honda. But if you don't know people in town, it's very hard to do business. It's very hard. First thing, you got to get your own crew. And when people don't know you, the most important thing in business is trust. That's the most important thing, fairness and trust. But you can't build trust with a telephone call. People have to look in your eyes and see if you trust each other. So I've learned that we really need to be close to where we can get to and where we know people. So our big center of business is in Joplin, Missouri. We've got 6 or 7 stores there in town. We've been there 20 years. So we're doing well in Joplin. It's a town much like North Little Rock. About 50,000 during the week and about 150,000 on the weekend. So that's what's happened to me in the automobile business. If you're ever in Northwest Arkansas, please go by. If you go up there and you want to see Walmart's building or finishing a $2 billion headquarters. Mr. Walton ever came out of his grave, he would fire every one of them that wanted to do that because he would not approve a $2 million building. So, but drive up to Northwest Arkansas. We've got the most beautiful Honda store, and we're the #1 dealer in Kansas, Missouri, and Arkansas, all 3 states. So I mention that because my building was 23 years old, but it looked nice, and I didn't want to tear it down. But they talked me into building a new building, and it doesn't look like a Honda store. It's beautiful. It's all glass, and it's really the people that talked me into it. I'm glad they did because it's become a monster, a great monster. We think we can grow and grow and grow. So we're right on the interstate. We've been there, had that property for a long time. So that's a little story about the automobile business. Now, what most of y'all know us, I want to tell you about the hotel and the restaurants. Many years ago, I brought them to a breakfast club. We put in $25 a month to get. We got $7,000 or $8,000 over a period of years, and so we bought a little piece of property where the Wyndham is, and so we didn't know what to do with it. It had a lot of streets in it. We find out if the city closed those streets, they become the property of the adjoining property. So we got the city to close the streets because nobody was using them. So now we had 10 acres of land. And so a man came along from Oklahoma City that owned 13 Hiltons. His name was Roy Cycle. He goes, guys, if y'all will give me this land, I'll give you a percentage of the hotel. So all the other guys had better sense than me, and they said, just give us our money back from the Breakfast Club. So I stayed in and got 5% of the hotel, and I got a big refund from IRS for something. So I was glad and happy. So I thought it was great. I got 5%. I didn't even know how to spell a hotel. So I never go down there or anything. I just drove by and I go, you see, I showed my family. We own the bathroom in the back corner. So about 10, 11 years go by and I get a call. This Frank Fletcher? Sounds familiar. I'm sure I am. He said, I'm with the RTC. Are you familiar with that name? And I said, no. He said, do you have an education? I said, I think. He goes, well, we're the Republic Trust Corporation. We're the federal government. And your loan is in default. But at that point in time, all the banks were going broke, and the interest was 16, 18%. I think it's 2008. So he said, and I said, well, sir, I'm sorry to hear that, but I only own 5%. I said, how much is it? And he said, we're going to sue you for $11 million. I said, what? $11 million. I quickly did a little math, and I said, well, we sure don't have $550,000, but we could sell our home and go see our relatives and try to pay you if that's what we owe. And he goes, you don't understand. We're coming after you for $11 million. I said, well, you don't understand. You can't do that. And so we argued a little bit, and he said, do you understand what joint and several means? I go, no, I never heard of that. He said, you signed a partnership called joint and several. If y'all don't remember anything else tonight, go home and write it down in your bathroom window. Joint and several is a type of partnership you never want to join in because it means that they can come after you if you own 1% for the whole amount. And the first question you'd ask, why would you sign something like that? I didn't know what it was and never heard of it. And the lawyer told us when we were signing it, this man owns 13 Hiltons. He's very rich. You're safe. But he went broke. And so now I owe $11 million. And I mean, it was the scariest time of my life financially. So, to make a long story short, they came after me for 3 years. They wanted to auction the hotel off on a milk box with a microphone and sell it. And then if they got $3 million for it, I'd only owe $8 million. Man, I'm gonna tell you something. We didn't sleep. So, make a very long story short, after 3 years, I found out through my friend Jerry Jones, who was in Dallas, that these banks, each time one bank sold this loan to another bank, they took a haircut. And they really, when the last bank that the federal boys were taking over, the loan was written down to $6 million. So I went down to Dallas and told them I'd give them $6 million. I said, don't try to pull my leg because I know what you got on the books. And I said, you sue me or I'll give you $6 million and you give me a clear title and you go chase anybody else you want to. So they said, well, we don't want to make you mad. Could you get a cashier's check? We don't want your regular check. So I bought the hotel for $6 million when it was a Hilton. And then when our franchise was up, we chose Wyndham for a new 20-year franchise. So that's how I became a hotel man. Now you got to understand that I'm broke from writing the money I didn't even have. I have no idea how to run a hotel, but one thing I learned, I traveled 30 years calling on Walmart, and every hotel I ever went in, I said, where's a good place to go eat? Because I always was hungry. And hotels have terrible food. And so I went down to Dallas, and I was having lunch at a Benihana's, and I was sitting with another guy, and I said, you know, is the manager here? And so this young man came out, and he said, my name's Kevin, I'm the big man. And I go, is that your last name? He goes, no, I just want you to know I'm Kevin, I'm the big man. I go, well, what makes you the big man? He goes, well, my daddy is Roy Okia, and he owns all of Benihana's, and I'm the big man. I want you to know that. And I said, well, nice to meet you. I said, do you have any franchises? He goes, yeah, we have 8. And I said, where's your biggest franchise? He said, Las Vegas, Nevada, big. Hilton. He goes, you want to buy a franchise? And I go, I'm thinking about it. He goes, what kind of hotel do you have? I said, Hilton. That's what we had. He goes, oh, you got Hilton. He didn't ask me what state, what town. You got Hilton? You got check? You have check? I said, what'd you say? He said, you have check. At that point in time, I had a billfold and I had a check. I said, yeah, I got a check. I said, you got yellow pad? He goes, yeah. So I wrote the yellow pad out, 20 years, state of Arkansas, and everything I could think of, made a copy of it, and I gave him a check for $35,000. That's what he wanted. So he signed it, and I had copies made, and I had witnesses. So I go home, I wake up the next morning petrified. What have you done, Frank Fletcher? What have you done? There's nobody in the world going to come to your hotel to eat Japanese food. So about 3 days later, I get a call from Miami. This lady said, I'm with Benihana Corporation. I need your home address. And I said, what for? She said, we're going to send you some food coupons. I go, lady, I'm fat as a pig. I don't need any food coupons. She said, we don't sell franchises to Little Rock and to Arkansas, and we're going to return your check. I said, ma'am, when you send that food coupon, send a lawyer up here, because your big man signed this thing, and he sold me a franchise, and you're in hot water. And in a few days, Roy Okia, his father, called me from New York, and he said, I hear my son got loose. He said, why don't I just come down there and meet you, and let's make the best of it. 26 years later, we won the award for being the best Benihana in the whole continental United States. That's Mr. Shapur ran it all these years, and he's the one that made it what it is. So the Riverfront Steakhouse was copied off of Del Frisco's in Dallas. And the gentleman on that taught me how to buy the meat from Chicago, don't buy it locally, and to get the ovens where you can roast the steaks and put salt and pepper on it and butter, and it runs the salt and pepper down in the bottom and a hot plate, and you get a good steak. So we've been very lucky that many of you have made our restaurant very, very good restaurant, and we're deeply appreciative of it. So one thing I want to tell y'all, my last part of my pitch here is I almost lost my life. I was in the hospital with diverticulitis. You ever get that, you got a problem. But so I was in there 18 days, and I don't know, when you're dying or think you're dying, you really get scared. And I really dug deep in my faith to say, if this is my time to go, I'm okay. But it was a time for me to learn a lot about my faith and my belief. And it's sad to say it takes something like that to bring you to your core. But sometimes it takes a rock in a hard place. But today, as I started off saying, every turn I take now, the Lord is directing me, I believe, and I'm very thankful for that. And I thank y'all tonight and invite you to come to our hotel and to our restaurants. And this has been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Hey, wasn't that amazing? Mr. Fletcher, it was a big honor having you. And to thank you for your time. We have this beautiful gift there. Now, we didn't plan it as well as we should have. We don't have the Riverfront Steakhouse catering us tonight. Next time, we'll get that done. But Mr. Fletcher and Mr. Shapur, thank you guys so much. This is encouraging, inspiring, challenging, and it's exactly what these classes are for.
We'll answer any questions. Okay.
But we don't have Riverfront, but we do have smoked prime rib right next door. We have plenty of seats. If you do not have a ticket, please come join us next door. We want you there. So we thank you for coming. These men, I think, are going to join us for dinner. So we'll see you guys in the Great Hall right now. Thank you, everybody.